So before mag-discuss sa mga different tests, let us first talk about the difference sa parametric and non-parametric test. Nahuman na tag-istorya about normal distribution, and then na-mention ako sa inyo na if your data is normally distributed, then you will use parametric test. But if your data is not normally distributed, either positively skewed siya or negatively skewed siya, then we will use the non-parametric test. So, mo ni ang ilahang difference. When you say parametric test class, this is a statistical test in which specific assumptions are made about your population, and then the parameter is also known. So naatay mga assumptions about the population parameter. So we will be using the parametric test. Like kabaluta sa characteristics sa ato ang population. And then ang pinaka-important nga data ani is the distribution. Normally distributed dapat ang data nga ma-collect nato from our sample, which is also taken from our population. Okay? And then we will only use the parametric tests if the measurement level or our data type is in interval or ratio. So please review. Sa chapter 1 nato, we discussed the different levels of measurements or data type, katong nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. So remember, di ba, si nominal is our categorical na mga data. We don't have numerical values here. Instead, mga categories lang like sex. So pag sex, we just categorize our data or our participants as either male or female. So wala numerical value, nominal na siya. Pag ordinal, naay numerical value pero naay ranking. And the ranking is assigned by the researcher. So for example, when I score you 1, meaning I disagree sa sentence na. If I score it 5, then I agree with the statement na gihatag like sa questionnaire. So naay level, naay ranking, and the values are not really true values. Ginagamit lang sila to indicate like mga verbal na mga interpretations. Ordinal na siya nga data. But when you say parametric test, kailangan either interval or ratio ang ato ang data. So dapat na ay true numerical values dito before we can use the test. And most of the time, what we measure sa ato ang parametric test are the mean. For in terms of the measure of central tendency, the mean is very relevant. That is why we talked about the z-test, and then kung nakita ninyo ang definition sa z-test, it's a parametric test. Kasi we are using the mean, we are testing the difference between means of either sample or the population. And the information about the population, syempre, is completely known. We know the characteristic of our population. And then, applicability, mga variables nato. So please review also about our research variables, independent and dependent variables. And then, example lang ito, example lang ng parametric test. Syempre, you know that the z-test is a parametric test. And another example is the Pearson test. Ginagamit natin ito siya for correlation test. Kanang if you want to know the relationship of one variable to another. So for example, gusto ka makabalo sa if there is a relationship between sex and mathematical ability. Gusto ka makabalo kung naabay relationship ang mathematical ability sa isa ka tao sa iyahang sex. So ingana siya ang gamiton, is there a significant relationship between sex and mathematical ability? Correlation test na siya. Then pag normally distributed atong data, then we will be using the Pearson test. So ang kabaliktaran class sa parametric test is the non-parametric test. So pag non-parametric test, number one again, our samples are not distributed normally. Okay? So either positively skewed or negatively skewed siya. That is why arbitrary ang basis of test statistic. Wala kay basis nga normal distribution ba siya or dili. And then if your data collected here is nominal or ordinal, you cannot use parametric test. Automatic mag non-parametric test ka. Now, since the data is not normally distributed, then you cannot use the mean because the mean cannot be a representative sa whole sample na imuhang nakuha. Therefore, sa non-parametric test, we are using the median in terms of the measure of central tendency. And then at the same time, if you don't have any information about your population, you cannot also use the parametric test, so non-parametric test diretso. Sa applicability, you can either use the variables and mga attributes. Kanang attributes, example, beauty. Beauty is an attribute but you cannot measure beauty. So wala ka dinhi what do you call that? Wala ka dinhi interval or ratio scales na data. So mo na siya dire siya sa non-parametric na test. And if you want to measure the relationship of two things, kanya wala na satisfy ang mga parametric na mga assumptions. So instead of Pearson, we will use the Spearman. So Spearman test is an example of a non-parametric test. So sa statistics class, tanang test na to available can be classified into two only. So pwede siya dire sa parametric, and those na wala nakasatisfy sa mga requirements sa parametric test, mahulog sa non-parametric test. So mo ni ang mga examples. Kulang kay ko sa time, pero may maiga na nga to ang klase. And then, as you can see in your screen, daghan kaayo tag test sa statistics. So, ito yung mga test na ginagamit natin for hypothesis testing. So we have here parametric test if you only have one sample. Human na tag-discuss kay z-test na one sample. But we can also use the t-test. So, mo na siyang atuang sunod nga lesson, ang atuang t-test. Now, if you have two samples, if the two samples are independent from each other, then we are also done with the z-test na two samples. But we also have another one, which is the two-group t-test. But if the two samples are dependent sa ilaha, sa each other, then we call it paired samples. We only have here the paired t-test. So we'll get to know them as we move on with our discussion. So ang ilahang mga non-parametric test na mga counterparts, napod tayo mga non-parametric test counterparts, especially for one sample, we have here the chi-square, the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, runs, and binomial. Isa-isa ho na to sila discuss pohon. And then for two samples, napunta. Kung ang two samples are independent from each other, then we have the following test: the chi-square, the Mann-Whitney, the median, and the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. And for the paired sample t-test na pod, either we use the sign, the Wilcoxon, the McNemar, or the chi-square test. So medyo daghan-daghan pag yun ni sila class. Okay? May pangutana so far? So far, nag-expect wala dyan mo kailana sa ilaha. This is just an introduction kung sa kadaghan nga test ang pwede na to gamiton for statistics para i-analyze ang mga data nato sa atuang research. So, since na-introduce na nako sa inyo si z-test, karon let's differentiate it from the t-test. Kasi almost the same kasi si t-test and si z-test, and sometimes students will be confused kung unsa ang gamiton nga test for 2 samples or for 1 sample. Kasi pwede siya z-test, pwede po siya t-test. Now, how are we going to know kung unsa jud ang atong gamiton? Z-test ba or t-test? You just have to answer this question. Do you know the population standard deviation? Kung pagtanaw nimo sa problem, nakita nimo oy wala nakabutang, wala dili known ang population standard deviation. Pag wala gani na automatic class, we will be using the t-test. Again, pag wala ta kabalo sa standard deviation sa population, automatic we will be using the t-test. But if we know the population standard deviation, the next question that we are going to ask is the sample size above 30? Kung ang sample ba nato, ang N ha, ang N, we are talking about the sample size here, the N. If it's above 30, then that's the time we will use the z-test. But if it's below 30, then we will be using the t-test. That's how you differentiate what statistical test are we going to use. Okay? So kani, para ni siya sa mga how na mag-statistics. This is, I use this one, ginagamit na ko ni siya nga graph or chart, I mean, pag naay nagapat stat sa ako, I will just read their research, and then depende sa ilahang research, using this chart, I will identify the correct statistical test na gamiton. But before ka mo decide kung unsa jud nga statistical test imuhang gamiton, you have to know the parametric assumptions. Mao ni ang dapat i-fulfill sa data para makaingon ka nga you will be using parametric test. So akong pirmi ginaingon, dapat ang data normally distributed. Kaya mao gid na siya ang number 1 nga parametric assumption na kailangan i-fulfill. But actually, kailangan po na ang mga data nato are independent from each other, and at the same time, unbiased ang mga samples na ito ang nakuha. Like when we do experiment, we have to get rid of the bias, or kung we survey using questionnaires, then dapat unbiased po ang mga samples na nakuha. And at the same time, dapat na ay equal variances. So remember, especially for 2 samples and more than 2 samples na mga research, since na kay pila ka buok nga grupo, dapat kana ng mga grupo will have equal variances. Remember, the variance, diba, square nimo ang standard deviation. That will be your variance. So, dapat mag-equal na sila para masatisfy ang atong parametric assumption and makakonclude ta na yes, we will be using a parametric test in the analysis of our data. So, for example, ako, nag-statman ko, no? I'll be reading the statement of the problem of the research, and then the hypothesis of the research, and then I'll be looking at their data. So, before ko maka-decide kung unsa nga test akong gamiton, I'll be identifying what type of data has the researchers collected. So, kapag the data is discrete or categorical, meaning in simpler terms, i-simplify nato, the data is either nominal or ordinal, then for 1 or 2 samples, I'll be using the chi-square test. So most of the time, we will be using the chi-square if the data are either nominal or ordinal. But if the data is continuous, when you say continuous, kay interval nga scale. So interval or ratio nga scale will fall here. I'll be looking at their questions. Muna akong ginaingon og statement of the problem. If their question is asking for the relationship, kasi naadyoy sa research we'll be looking for relationships of 2 variables or we will be looking at the relationship of two things. Kung naay ana na question sa ilahang ginakandak nga research, then kani ang mga test na possible. So dili kay ko magdwell sa aha kay dili pa kay ninyo siya masabtan karon. But anyway, please know that these are the tests that we do if we are looking for the relationship. So we have here regression analysis and then correlation analysis. Kung parametric, it's Pearson's R. If it's non-parametric, that's Spearman's rank correlation. But if their question is looking for the difference of two things, parehas sa ato ang pirmi nga example nga there is no difference between boys and girls, or there is no difference between BS Psychology and AB Broadcasting. Ana na mga problems class din hina siya mahulog. Nagapangita ta og difference sa duha or mas more than two pa na group of things or group of people. So again, since kailangan ma-fulfill ang parametric assumption, tanawon na to kung equal ba ang variances sa atong mga groups. And these are the examples of test na ginagawa to know if our groups or our samples have equal variances. We have the Fmax, the Brown and Smith, and the Bartlett's test. And then, to know the difference between means, okay, like mean sa group 1 o mean sa group 2, tanawon sa nato kung pila ka grupo ang naata. Kung duha ka grupo lang, parehas atong example last time, na naatay duha ka grupo nga BS Psychology ug AB Broadcasting. So duha lang to sila. If na satisfy ang parametric assumptions this one, then please know that we have tests like the students unpaired t-test and the paired t-test. So mo ni akong ginaingon class nga sa statistics dili jud kaayo ginagamit si z-test. Instead, we will be using the t-test. But if the parametric assumptions are not satisfied, the non-parametric na equivalent aning p-test is the Mann-Whitney test or the Wilcoxon rank test. Pero class, sa mga researches, not all the time duha ka grupo lang ang atuang sample. Usahay mag more than 2 groups pa na siya. So pag more than 2 groups, the p-test will not be applicable for that. Instead, kung nasatisfy ang parametric assumptions, that's the time we use the Anova. I don't know if you have heard about Anova. It's analysis of variance, but we use Anova if we want to know the difference between more than 2 groups. Okay? Pero pag wala na satisfy ang parametric assumptions, we also have the non-parametric na equivalent of Anova. We call it the Kruskal-Wallis test. So medyo overload kaayo siya sa inyuhang brain, but ay magkabala ka kay dili man nato ni siya huruton og discuss today. We will just concentrate sa t-test today. Okay, isa-isa sa kay basing mabuang taaning ato ang statistics sa kadaghan og test na pwede gamiton. Okay? Questions so far? Dapat pa ko estudyante basig nakatulog na sa kadaghan sa information na ako ang gihatag. Napaman siguro.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, wait lang ha. I'll just check that. Okay. Sige. So, let's talk about testing differences between means. Though nagsugod na jud ta with the z-test, but then again, z-tests are not really that used in statistics, especially sa research. So, in this chapter, we will understand the importance of the t-test. So, mag-concentrate na sa t-test in hypothesis testing. Supply the needed data. This one is data. Data in the t-test formula. Operate the t-test in independent and correlated groups. And we will run the t-test sa Excel. And then we will not be using the SPSS. Instead, we will have the JASP software. Okay? We will have software application later. And then come up with sound decision and conclusion based from the given na data. So, kagaina pa ko sige ingon og t-test. Unsa di ay na ang t-test? So this one, we have two types of t-test class. The t-test for independent samples. We also call this independent sample t-test or unpaired t-test or student t-test. Muna siya ang daghan kaayo nga pangalan ni t-test. Independent sample t-test, unpaired t-test, and the student t-test. So kanus agamiton si t-test class? This is used to determine significance of the difference between two means. So for example, na kay duha ka group of people na you want to know if naabay difference sa ilahang ability or sa ilahang characteristic. So kung duha lang yun na sila kabuok nga grupo, then t-test will be applicable. And unlike the z-test, the t-test is useful if you have less than 30 na sample. Ang z-test manggod pang daghan. Pag daghan na kay kag sample, more than 30 na, z-test to siya. Pero if you have less than 30 sample and you don't know the standard deviation, especially that of the population, then t-test will be applicable and helpful sa inyo ha. Now, do not forget that t-test is a parametric test. Therefore, naa kay mga assumptions na kailangan ma-satisfy before nimo gamiton si t-test. So, unsa tong mga assumption na to? Number 1, the collected data from your samples should be normally distributed. If i-graph nimo siya, normally distributed siya. And number 2, kailangan ang level of measurement is either interval or ratio. Tanawon nimo imong data kung interval ba na siya or ratio. Pag nominal gani na siya, ang imong nakuha lang dito babae o lalaki, t-test cannot be used. Okay? So kailangan interval or ratio. And t-test is used when the samples are drawn from different population. Do not forget that the z-test class, your samples belong to the same population. Parehas atong College of Arts and Sciences, isa sila ka population. Gihati lang nimo into 2. Imuhang sample like BS Psychology and AB Broadcasting. Pag abot sa t-test, even if your samples do not belong from the same population, you can use the t-test. Okay? So medyo complicated. Wait lang. Medyo complicated ang ato ang formula for the t-test. So mo ni siya akong ginaingon nga it is very helpful if you have the software. Ako ang problema are those na naka-cellphone lang kasi the softwares will not be applicable pag naka-cellphone lang. I don't know if you can run the Excel sa inyong cellphone, but kung makaran ang Excel sa inyong cellphone, you can also do the t-test sa Excel. Pero ano siya, mahimo jud ni siya advantage dito sa mga naka-laptop or naka-PC kay makagamit mo og software. Pag wala jud mo class, wala mo choice, magmano-mano ta og compute sa t-test or sa t-score. Ang atong formula jud sa t-test is x1 minus x2 divided by sx1 minus x2. And then, most of the time, kaning sa baba, sx1 minus x2, dili na siya given. Kailangan pa na nimo siya i-compute. And to compute for this, kaning formula sa ilalom ato ang gamiton. Medyo complicated lang siya tanawon class. Pero kaya lang ni siya. Kasi especially that t-test is used for below 30 na sample. So, dili po siya kaayo daghan. Pero actually, daghan na ng 30 kung imano-mano ni mo siya compute. Kaya lang sa statistics, if you do the manual computation, you just have to have patience. Okay? So, to compute the sx1 minus x2, we use this formula, the square root of the n1s1 squared plus the n2s2 squared divided by n plus n2 minus 2 times N1 plus N2 divided by N1 times N2. Okay? So, sa meaning na nila, X1 refers to the mean of group 1. Remember, t-test is used to test the difference between two groups. So, the X1 there is the mean of your group 1. Okay, so this one is the X1 here. And then the X2 is the mean of your group 2. So, that's X2. So, mean ha kay parametric test man ta. So, we will be using the mean. Okay? Now, let's move on. Wait lang. Remember, na kanidili given. Kailangan na to siya i-compute. So we have to know what is N1S1 and what is N2S2. N1S1 class is the sum of squares of group 1. Okay? So katong mga scores sa group 1, kailangan to nimo ipang square sila tanan tapos i-add nimo, that will be the N1S1. Tapos, ang N2S2, maupo to ang sum of squares of group 2. Yeah, I mean, ang katong tanang scores, example na kay 10 kabuok nga scores sa imuhang group 2, imo to silang i-square tanan, and then i-add nimo ang ilahang squares. That will be the N2S2. And then the N1 sa ilalom, and then dinhi, is the number of observation in group 1, meaning kung pila kabuok ang observation, kung 30 kabuok, then that's 30. Okay? And syempre, N2 is for the number of observation sa atuang group 2. So, bao ni siya ang formula sa atuang independent sample t-test. Okay? So, example. We have an example here. To find out which method of teaching is more effective in improving the performance, two groups of trainees were randomly chosen for the study. And then the following scores reflect their performance after the training. So, mao daw ni ang mga scores. The experiential, kay methods of teaching man, tanawon kung naabay difference, ang duha ka methods of training in terms sa performance sa mga trainees. So the first group sa mga trainees, ang method na gigamit sa ilaha experiential. And then the second group of the trainees, ang gigamit sa ilaha kay lecture na method of teaching. And then after that, gitest sila, and then mauni ang mga scores. Okay? So kung magbuhat ta og null hypothesis, then mao ni ang atong null hypothesis. The two methods of teaching do not significantly differ in improving performance. Null man, so mao nang do not significantly differ. Pero kung alternative hypothesis, the two methods of teaching significantly differ in improving the performance. So as you can see, the alternative hypothesis is non-directional. Anong non-directional man? When you read the problem, wala man siya niingon nga mas efficient or mas effective ang experiential kaysa sa lecture. Wala man na state sa problem. So mo na nga, ang atuang alternative hypothesis, non-directional sad. Moingon lang ta nga, yes, na ay difference silang duha, pero wala tay ginahatagan og favor among the two. So unsay meaning ani kung non-directional atong hypothesis? We will be doing the two-tailed test. Kasi just like the z-test class, the t-test also have two types of test, one-tailed and two-tailed. So you just have to look at the hypothesis if directional siya or non-directional. So again, mauni ang atuang mga scores. Before ta magamit og software para sa mga walay software, we will do the manual computation. Sa gani atong formula. Wait lang, isulat na to. Ready ko magsigig balik-balik. Kasi actually, I'm not used to doing the manual computation since I have access sa software, nagadiretso na ko sa software. So, di ko ka-memorize class actually sa formula sa ato ang t-test. So, unsa ganito, duha na siya ka klaseng formula. Pero pwede na to ni siya class idugtong atong formula. Iisa na to para dito mag, kani silang duha. Instead of using the sx1 minus x2, idugtong na to ni sa ilalom kaning formula niya. So, balik na dito. So, the t-score here is x1 minus x2 divided by, supposedly, it's x1 minus x2, no? Pero, again, ato ang i-dugtong dere. So, bigay ko ka-memorize. Kadjot, kaya ko ka-memorize. Yan, isulat na ko siya daan. So that's N1 S1 squared plus N2 S2 squared divided by N1 plus N2 minus 2 times, times N1 plus N2 divided by N1 times N2. Okay? So, let's move on. Nawala. Okay. Sige. So this is how what we are going to do. Remember class that the x1 is the mean of the group 1. So how are you going to compute for the mean? Actually supplied na ko na siya sa ilalom. But para sa sake sa tanan nga mag-manual computation, di ba ang mean is you just have to add all scores divided by the number of items. So 8 plus 10 plus 12 plus 6 plus 6 plus 7 plus 9 plus 8 plus 7 plus 11. That is 84 ang iyahang sum divided by the number of scores 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So muna nakabutang dira N1 is equal to 10. So this is divided by 10, meaning ang mean, this one, sa group 1 is 8.4. Minus, ang mean sa group 2, this one here is the group 2. So 5 plus 6 plus 3 plus 4 plus 7 plus 8 plus 6 plus 5 plus 4 and plus 8. So that's a total of 56 divided by 10 gihapon. Pareha sila nga 10 kabuok. So divided by 10, the mean for group 2, this is correct, that is 5.6. Okay? So divided by, unsay meaning sa N1, S1, it's the sum of squares of the scores sa imuhang group 1. Unsay meaning ana class? Kani sila kada scores imuhang square. So like 8 square, what is the square of 8? It's 64. Tapos squared sa 10, it's 100. Square lang nimo kada score and then square nimo. And then 12 squared is 144. Nasundan pa class? I hope nasundan pa ha. So 6 squared is 36. This is also 36. 7 squared is 49. Kanang wala gud tay salig sa atong kaugalingon pati ang 7 squared kay ato ang i-calculate. 9 squared is 81 and then 8 squared is 64 again. This is 49 again and then 11 squared is 121. Okay? So, ni siya karon class. Wait lang. Yeah. Ito ang i-add. So, i-add na to. Ilan siya? Wait lang, may ginatanaw ko. Okay. So 64 plus 100 plus 144 plus 36 plus 36 plus 49 81 plus 64 plus 49 plus 121. This is 744. Wait lang. Ano naman siya? -2. Wait lang ha, kay dili pareho ang formula sa book o sa internet. Bakit? Okay. Anyway, that's 744. And then let's do the group 2. Let's do the group 2. So this is 5 squared is 25. This is 36. This is 9. This is 4 squared, 16. 7 squared is 49. And then 8 squared is 64. This is 36. This is again 25. This is 16 and 64. And then i-add na to. So 25 plus 36 plus 9 plus 16. Libat na po. 9, 16, 49, 64,
40, ma'am.
36. Ito ang i-admit. Okay. Asa na ta? 36, 25, 16, ug 64. Plan, sir? 3? 340? You have the same answer, right? So, actually, kanang N1, S1 squared, dili pa na siya mao. Kasi, wait lang. Dili 744 ug 340 atong gamiton ha. Naani siya formula. N1 S1 squared is equal to the sum of x1 squared minus Muna akong ginaingon nga medyo complicated pag magmano-mano ta. So I'll give you another formula ha to compute for the N1 S1. So this is basta makakita gani mo og ing ani class kaning symbol na ni, it talks about the summation. Meaning i-add mi mo tanan divided by the N1. So unsay meaning ani? To compute for the N1 S1 squared, you need the sum of all scores na gi-square. So mo to siya ang 744. Again, gi-square ni mo tanan tas gi-add, that's 744. Mao ni siya ang summation of x1 squared. Okay? Tapos, this time, minus, remember this is the summation of x1, pero walay squared ha, so mao ni siya tanan. I-add lang nimo tanang scores, di ba? I-add na to tanang scores, mao na siya ang summation of x1. So that's 84, and then square nimo divided by n. So unsay n? Pila na kabuok? 10 sila kabuok. So 744 minus 84 squared is 7,056 divided by 10. Okay? Pila answer ani? 744 minus 7,056 divided by 10 is 705.6. So N1 S1 squared is 744 minus 705.6. The answer is 38.4. So muna itong ibutang diri class, 38.4 plus i-compute pa nato ang sa second group. For the second group, it's the same thing. N2S2 squared equals summation of the scores of the group 2 and then E square minus the summation of the scores of the group 2 and then E square na pod and then divided by the number of samples sa group 2. So pila to atong na-compute. This one is the summation of all the scores nga gi-square. So diba gi-square nato ni sila isa-isa niya gi-add nato. That is 340 minus kani siya class is the summation of all the scores in group 2. So tanang score sa group 2 gi-add katong before ta nagkuha og mean. So mo niyang nakuha 56. So, kani siya 5 plus 6 hangtod plus 8, 56 na siya tanan. And then, square ni mo na, divided by pila na sila kabuok, 10. So, that is 10. So, 340 minus 56 squared plus it's 3136 divided by 10. So, 340, ay sorry, mas man na. Kadjot, let me delete this. Okay. 340 minus 3,136 divided by 10 is 313.6. So N2S2 is equal to 340 minus 313.6 is 26.4. So maupod na atong gamitan karon sa pag-compute. Makahurot og oras ang mano-mano nga computation. So it's 26.4 divided by N1. N1 remember is 10. 10 na sila kabuok. Sample size man ng N. So 10 plus pila kabuok ang N2? 10 pod minus 2. And then i-multiply nato ni sa N1 again is 10 plus 10 gihapon ang N2 divided by N1 times N2. So 10 times 10. So karon kay naa na tanang data nato for the computation of the T-score. So pwede na ta magsugod og compute. So 8.4 minus 5.6 it's 2.8 divided by the square root of 38.4 plus 26.4, it's 64.8 divided by 10 plus 10 minus 2, 20 minus 18, that's 18, times 10 times 10, it's 20, divided by 10 times 10, it's 100. So ngayon, 2.8 divided by the square root of 64.8 divided by 18, that is 3.6 times 20 divided by 10, 100 ay na, it's 0.2. Ako dyan yung step by step ha. So 2.8 divided by the square root of 3.6 times 0.2, it's 0.72. Nahurot na akong space, class. Dili ta magpadayon. Okay? So 2.8 now divided by the square root of, dili na di ay. Kay square root na nato siya. Tanggalon nato ni. Okay. So what is the square root of 0.72? The answer is 0.8485281374. So the final answer, the T-score here, 2.8 divided by the answer, it's 3. Kung 2 decimal places, the T-score is 3.30. Okay, again, the score is 3.30. Nahuman na yun siya. Taas kaayo siya. Okay? So since this is recorded, please review the recordings para sa mga magmano-mano og compute class, kaya ninyo ni. Okay. Okay. So please remember the score. It's 3.30. Pwede na nako i-delete ang writing sa screen. I think I can only finish the unpaired t-test or the independent sample t-test. Sa midterm na lang yun taani, hala, na-delete noon. Sorry, wala ko gituyo. Sa midterm na lang yun taani mag-paired t-test. Kaya medyo taas kaayo. Kung taas ang unpaired, unsa na lang ang paired. Okay, so unsa to ato ang 3.3 ato ang na compute na t-score. Now, unsaon siya pag-interpret? Just like the z-test, para makahatag ta og conclusion, kailangan nato og critical value from the table. Ug wa ko nag-ingon nga inyuhan ning memorization kay mabuang paani. So it's kung sa mga exam class, mga quiz, you are allowed to look at the table, bring a table, you can print this or you can open sa inyong mga ginagamit phone or laptop this table. Okay? So again, let's have this one. Critical values for the t distribution. We have to know if the test is one-tailed or two-tailed. So let's go back sa atong hypothesis. The two methods of teaching significantly differ in improving performance. Unsa ginaingon niya? Naay difference or kung null hypothesis walay difference pero it's non-directional. Walay direction. So kung walay direction, it should be two-tailed. Now, for social sciences na mga study, ang ato ang level of significance is most likely 0.05. Okay? Again, most of the time, it's 0.05. We are really not that strict. Medyo taas lang niya ang table no kay sa z-test I only gave you the 0.05 and the 0.01. This time sa t-test gikumpleto ang tanan nga pwede nga value for level of significance. Now, para mabala nato atong critical value, we have to know the DF. Remember that the DF is the degrees of freedom. And how are you going to compute this one? Kung isa ka sample lang, DF is equal to n-1. But if duha ka samples, remember natay duha ka grupo diri, experiential and lecture. So ang atong himuon kay n1 plus n2 minus 2. So pila to siya? 10 plus 10 minus 2. So that's 20 minus 2, 18. Meaning atong degrees of freedom is 18. So this one going there. Okay? So asa sila mag-meet duha? This one. 2.101. So please take note of our t-score nga tabular value. That is 2.101. And ang atong t-score na na-compute is 3.30. So paano siya i-interpret? Karon ani siya ato ang interpretation. Wait lang. Trace na to. Okay? So the decision rule, parehas lang ni siya class sa ato ang z-test. If the computed t is greater than the tabular t, reject the null hypothesis. Again, if the computed t is greater than the tabular t, reject the null hypothesis. So, asa may mas tako sa ila? Syempre, the computed t. Mas tako siya kay 3.30, kani 2.101. Therefore, kay mas dako ang ato ang na-compute nga t value, then we have to reject the null hypothesis. So kung maghatag-tag decision ani, therefore, Since gi-reject na to tong null, katong na I know, therefore, reject the null hypothesis. Tama ang atong alternative hypothesis na nagaingon nga there is a significant difference between the two. Di na ako isulat. Ingon na ako. There is a significant difference between the two methods of teaching in improving the performance of the trainees. So, muna siya ang ginaingon. Nga naaday difference ang duha ka methods, ang experiential o lecture, in terms sa pag-improve sa performance sa atong mga trainings. Kay gi-reject man nato atong null hypothesis kay mas dako atong na-compute na T kaysa sa tabular na T. Questions? So far? So far. Makaano og uto class? Kaya? I hope kaya ha. Ulit-ulita dyan ninyo nagtanaw ning ato ang recording. So I'll give you another example. This time,
ma'am.
kaya, sige. This time, we will be using the software. So this is for those na mugamit og software. Itong JASP atong gamiton. Okay? So, a study was conducted by a group of fourth-year pharmacy students in XXX school to determine the level of male and female community pharmacist awareness on antimicrobial dispensing. So, a standardized survey questionnaire was adopted from an international research in 1 to 5 Likert scale. So, ang study is about gusto sa mga estudyante na mabalaan kung naabay difference ang babae o lalaki nga pharmacist sa ilahang awareness sa pag-dispense og mga antimicrobial. So nigamit siya og questionnaire, nag-adopted from an international study, and then it is sa Likert scale. Likert scale ang gigamit. Now, basig matingala mo, ma'am, ang questionnaire niya Likert scale. Di ba pag Likert scale kay ordinal na siya nga data. So ngano kaya mo gamit ta og t-test? Ano man gani siya class? Sa questionnaire, pag daghan kayo kag questions nga naka Likert scale, most of the time you will get the mean. And the mean will be the representative or the score for each individual nga mauna ang ilahang awareness. Example, daghan 10 kabuk nga question, i-answer siya 5555 tanan. So i-add ni mo na tanan, i-divide sa number of questions. Sample 50 unya 10 kabuk nga questions, 5 gihapon ang iyahang score. So kato kay gikuha man nato ang mean. Therefore, bisan pag ang imuhang questionnaire kay Likert scale, pwede gihapon ka mo gamit og t-test. Kay again, nikuha ta og mean. So sa research class, this one is for the conceptual framework of the research ng independent variable kay ang sex, ang male o female, and ang dependent variable katong ilahang level of awareness sa antimicrobial dispensing. Now, basig malibog pud mo nga sex, ma'am, nominal data man na, categorical, nganong mag-t-test man ta. For t-test class, ang pinaka-importante, ang imuhang dependent variable kay interval scale. Okay, so nahulog ni siya interval nga scale again kay nikuha man ta og mean para sa each individual. Okay? So, these are examples of the statement of the problem. I will teach you how to do this pag mag-research na mo pag third year ninyo. Mao ni ang mga questions na possible i-ask sa ilahang i-conduct na research. So what is the level of awareness on antimicrobial dispensing sa mga babae nga pharmacist? And then what is the level of awareness on antimicrobial dispensing sa mga lalaki nga pharmacist? Now ang third question, mao ni atong gamitan og t-test. Is there a significant difference in the level of awareness on antimicrobial dispensing between male and female community pharmacist? So number 1 and 2 questions, descriptive lang na. Kailangan lang nimo makuha ang mean sa bawat mo answer. Okay? And then dinhi, inferential statistics na kay nangutana naman siya naabaday difference ang babae ug ang lalaki nga pharmacist in terms sa ilahang awareness sa pag-dispense sa antimicrobial. So mao ni siya again ang mga assumptions na kailangan nato i-satisfy before ta maka-conclude nga parametric test atong gamiton and p-test. P-test is a parametric test. So the first one, normality. Normally distributed ba ato ang data? Number 2, ang ilahang variance equal ba? Number 3, independence of observation. Ang answer sa isa ka female, wala nag-aapekto sa answer sa second na female. So they have nothing to do with each other. So independent sila with each other, even ang sa mga lalaki. And then walay outliers, meaning walay extreme na score. So tanawan ninyo class kung mag-conduct mo survey kung naabay extreme na scores. Basig ang isa ka pharmacist iyang level of awareness kay 1. Tapos ang mostly sa mga scores sa mga pharmacist kay naa sa between 3 to 4. So katong 1 outlier na to siya, layo na kay to siya. Pag naay outlier, dili na siya normally distributed imuhang data, so di na kamo gamit og parametric nga test. And then kailangan there should be random sampling. Remember the random sampling, all members of the population has equal chance to be selected in your study. And then the independent variable should be in group, and then the dependent variable is at least interval. So ang groupings nato din male and female, and ang ato ang dependent variable kay ilahang level of awareness. So, mag-open ko JASP software. I still have 7 minutes left. And then, sa chat class, ihatag na ko ang sample na result sa gikandak nga survey. Okay? Independent. Nawala. Asa na to? Kadjat lang ha. This one. Ayan. So, duha. CSV file na ako ang gihatag sa inyo ha. Kasi remember, do not forget na ang atuang class, ang atuang JASP software, dili maka read og Excel na file. So, ang ma-read sa atuang JASP kay ang atuang CSV. So, kung example, ang inyuhang results sa survey kay inyuhang encode sa Excel, i-convert lang ninyo siya sa CSV. So, how are you going to do that? I-upload na ko na sa Schoology later. So, how are you going to do that? Pakita na ko sa inyo ha. Nakamantay remaining na time. So, example kani, mo ni ang scores nila sa level of awareness. Ano na ni siya ha, kanang mean na ni sa ilaha sa tanang questions nga gi-ask sa ilaha. So, mean na ni siya tanan. Kani tanan ang ako ang na-collect nga data. Tapos, tapad niya kay kung babae ba siya or lalaki. So, ilista na lang nato siya. Anyway, this is the sex. Mo ni siya ang groupings nato. So, always remember nga pag mag-encode mo data, ang first ana nga row should be the groupings. Kapag upload na to ani sa JASP unya, ang first nga row, himuon na niyag title or label. So, pag dili mo siya butangan ani, kaning first nga entry din, mahulog na siya label dito sa JASP. Yeah. So, ulito ninyo nigtanaw ha tomorrow. Hatag din ako ni sa inyo ha. So how to convert this file sa CSV? Save as lang class. Yeah, for example, ibutang na ko ni siya diri sa akong documents. So dinhi sa type of data naka-Excel man gud to, for example, pangitaon lang na ninyo ang CSV comma delimited. Ma-convert na sa CSV file ang imuhang file. And pwede na siya i-read sa atuang JASP. Okay? Tapos, sa ato ang JASP class, so this one, mo ninyo makita sa JASP, asa ninyo na siya makita, open, recent files nako na independent sample dataset naka CSV na siya. And then ma-import na niya. So mo na ni siya inyuhang makita. So as you can see, awareness is naka-interval scale. Ang track nato atong sex naka-nominal na scale. So dapat inyuhang i-check sa aha kung tama ba ang ilahang pagkabutang sa types of data. Oo, basin. Ma-appeal na siya ugma sa akong quiz sa basin. So, you study. And then, let's do the t-test. So, sa taas class, makita ninyo ang t-test. And since this is independent, they are independent from each other. So, you click independent samples t-test. Ang mugawas, ingani. Ang himuon nato class, ang grouping variable, mo nang kanang nag-group sa ilaha, mo niya ang ato ang mga independent variable. So di ba male ug female? So katong track kagaina or ang sex, ibalhin na nimo siya diri sa grouping variable. Tapos ang level of awareness mo na siya atong dependent variable, ibalhin nimo siya sa variables. Okay? So sa JASP software mo automatic compute na siya. So mo na niya na compute. The t-score na na-compute is -0.033 and the degree of freedom is 38. And take note of this, the p-value. Si p-value class, ginagamit nato siya pag software atong gamiton, and then we don't need the table for the created value here. And then pwede nato ipindot ang normality o equality of variance, mugawas ni siya class assumption checks, ginatest niya kung normally distributed ba atong data, ang test for equality mo of variances, mugawas pud na siya later. Sa last slide, i-discuss na kung sa meaning ana nila. Basta ipindot lang na ninyo normality and equality of variances. And kung gusto nimo makakita sa mga mean, pwede pud nato pinduton si descriptives. Ihatag niya si mean sa bawat nga grupo, male ug female, ug ang standard deviation. Now, ingato siya pag gamit sa software ha, unsaon siya pag interpret. Asa na to? This one. So mao ni siya ang interpretation pag software atong ginagamit. Sa software class, you don't need the t-score, you don't need the table. All you need to look at is the p-value. Okay? So ang p-value class, ani ang pag-interpret? A p-value of less than or equal to 0.05, kay mao ni ato ang level of significance, means that there is significant difference. Okay? Pag less than or equal to 0.05, meaning there is significant difference between your two groups. Pero look at this, it's 0.974, meaning mas taas siya sa 0.05. Unsa ibig sabihin ana? There is no significant difference. Ang meaning ana class, pag muhimo kag conclusion, there is no significant difference between the level of awareness of the male and female pharmacist. So mo na akong ginaingon nga mas dali mo gamit og software. You don't need the table, you don't need to compute. All you need to look at is the p-value. If it's less than 0.05, na ay significant difference sa imuhang two groups. Pag it's greater than 0.05, walay significant difference. And then katong duha nga assumption checks nga ako ang gi-check, test of normality to. Kung normally distributed ba itong data, no need to graph also, no need to compute, just look at the p-values here. It's the same thing, pag ang p-value higher than 0.05, higher ha, take note, pag mas taas siya sa 0.05, yes, normally distributed imong data. So kani kay higher man sa 0.05, so tama, no, normally distributed atong data, parametric test atong gamiton. For test for equality of variance, no need to compute for the variances also. You need to look at the p-value lang. If it's higher than 0.05, yes, equal atong variances or homogeneous ang ato ang groupings. Kay higher man 0.498. So that's how you interpret. Descriptives lang ni mean and standard deviation. So medyo exceed na ko sa akong time, pero that's it. Diha na lang sa ako taman sa ako ang midterm. Kulang taog time no, wala magugugma ba ko na taog ma-explain unta na ko na sa another example, pero I'll be giving you the recordings right after converting this and uploading this sa YouTube para ma-review ninyo siya. So tomorrow, you prepare for a quiz. Ilo na ko ni. Okay, questions before ta mag-end? Okay, basing na po may klase, malate na mo.